Hi, I'm Rachel, and this is the story of how I spent years fixing what my sister broke, until I finally stopped. And when I did, everything changed, not just for me, but for everyone in that room. Have you ever been the one holding things together without anyone noticing? If this story hits close to home, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. My sister Cassie always had a talent for being seen. In every school photo, she stood front and center, smiling like she owned the sun. Teachers remembered her name, neighbors complimented her hair, and relatives asked what she was up to. Even when I stood right beside her, they'd glance in my direction and say things like, "And you must be the quiet one." They weren't wrong. Growing up, I was the kid who stayed after school to help teachers stack chairs or rewire the projector cable when no one else could figure out why the screen kept flickering. Cassie, meanwhile, choreographed dances at pep rallies and once made the front page of the community newsletter for winning Best Spirit Outfit. I once fixed our home printer by disassembling it and cleaning out a jammed paperclip. Dad asked Cassie to help him put the ink in, then thanked her when it worked. She didn't correct him. Looking back, I don't think Cassie ever meant to steal the spotlight. It just followed her like a lost puppy. And me? I found comfort in the shadows. I liked being useful, invisible but effective. Like the code I wrote for the small business software company that paid me well to work quietly from my laptop, debugging other people's problems, streamlining what went unnoticed until it broke. That spring, just as the Texas bluebonnets began to bloom along the highways and the air shifted from soft coolness to the edge of heat, Cassie called and asked if she could stop by. It had been months since I'd seen her in person. Her voice was bright, almost sugary. "I have something big to show you," she said. "You're gonna be proud." I didn't hold my breath. She arrived 20 minutes late, as always, wearing a coral sundress and giant sunglasses perched on her head. In one arm, she carried a leather portfolio, and in the other, a caramel oat milk latte that she placed carefully on my coaster, only after snapping a photo of it on my coffee table. My apartment, a small second-floor unit overlooking a grocery store parking lot, suddenly felt sterile next to her filtered energy. "So," she began, flipping open the portfolio, "this is the future." Inside were glossy mood boards, soft pinks and golds, renderings of a converted van with reclining chairs, LED mirrors, shelves lined with premium nail kits. "I'm launching Austin's first mobile luxury salon," she declared. "A spa on wheels, nails, brows, the works. Think Glossier meets Airstream." I nodded slowly. "And how are you funding it?" Cassie leaned in, her perfume light and floral. "That's where it gets exciting. I only need $85,000. I almost choked on my water. She laughed. I know. It sounds like a lot. But I have it all priced out. I found a used van, and I already have a branding girl. The supplies are high-end, but that's the point. It's luxury. We come to them." "And the $85,000? I asked again. I tried banks. My credit scores, not ideal. But Dad said he'd help. Co-sign, maybe even front a bit if needed. I blinked. "Dad? Seriously?" She sipped her latte. "He believes in me." And of course he did. I could almost see it. Dad watching her flip through the mood boards, eyes softening, transported to the days she used to beg him for lemonade stand supplies. She'd always had a way of making wild ideas sound like inevitable success. And Dad, bless him, still saw her as the girl who wanted to own her own castle someday, not the woman who'd defaulted on 2 store cards and ghosted her last landlord. "I just thought I'd tell you," she said, standing up and smoothing her dress. "I know you're not big on beauty stuff, but maybe someday, when I'm rich and famous, I'll hire you to run the tech side." I forced a smile. Good luck, Cass." She kissed the air near my cheek and breezed out. 3 days later, I stopped by my parents' house to drop off some documents for Mom. The house smelled like cinnamon toast and coffee, comforting and familiar. Mom was in the kitchen humming along to an old 70s playlist. I found Dad at the dining table, reading glasses perched on the tip of his nose, pen in hand. He looked up and smiled. "Hey, sweetheart, got a minute?" I nodded, stepping into the room. He slid a thick envelope toward me. "I'm co-signing for Cassie. Thought you should know." My heart sank. "She showed me her plan," he added, flipping to a page with expense estimates. "It's all legit. She just needs someone to believe in her." I didn't say what I wanted to. That belief wasn't capital. That a branding girl and a pink mood board didn't make a business. That trust wasn't the same as a safety net she'd already burned once before. Instead, I watched his hand steady as he signed the last page. My own fists clenched under the table. It wasn't my loan, not my risk. But I knew, I always knew. That night, back in my apartment, I logged into work. One of the clients had flagged an error in their inventory dashboard. I traced it to a faulty conditional statement, fixed it in under 10 minutes, and sent the update through without fanfare. No one noticed, but the system worked again. Outside, Cassie's Instagram had already posted a photo of her holding a coffee by a pastel truck that wasn't hers yet, captioned, "Big things coming." Everything about Cassie's new business sparkled, from the glossy branding to the curated posts captioned with motivational quotes and pastel emojis. Her logo, a soft pink silhouette of a manicure hand surrounded by gold stars, was suddenly everywhere on Instagram. She'd even managed to get a local lifestyle blogger to share a post, claiming Cassie was the new face of mobile luxury. It was all very impressive, if you didn't look too closely. I looked. The week before Labor Day, I spent a long evening scrolling through her feed, each photo more manicured than the last. Clients laughing with glossy lips, glitter polish glinting under ring lights, carefully staged product shots with captions like "Dream big, hustle harder." Girl boss. There were no signs of chipped polish or missed appointments or late invoices. Just Cassie, in her signature white jumpsuit, leaning against a van that still didn't look quite street legal. She'd tagged it # booked and busy, but when I checked the LLC she'd registered, the business was still listed as pending documentation. I didn't say anything. I didn't ask questions. Because in my family, asking questions made you the problem. Instead, I told myself to let it go. It was their money, not mine. Their risk, not mine. That Sunday, I came over for lunch. Mom had made peach cobbler from scratch, the house filled with the warm scent of cinnamon and sugar. Dad was playing a John Denver record, humming along off-key while washing the dishes. Cassie wasn't there yet, but her energy was. Her new flyers fanned out on the hallway table, a stack of business cards with gold foil edges perched neatly in a tray by the door. "They're beautiful," I said, picking one up. Mom beamed. She designed them herself, took an online class in branding, and she's finally got that sparkle again, don't you think? I forced a smile. "Sure." We were halfway through lunch when the doorbell rang. Dad wiped his hands on a towel and went to answer it. From where I sat, I could see the edge of the doorway. 2 men stood outside, blue polos, clipboards, a certain tightness in their posture I recognized from years of watching repo shows on mute during debugging marathons. He was gone for longer than expected. When he came back, he wasn't carrying anything. Just silence. "What is it?" Mom asked. "They're here for the van," he said, voice thin. I stood. "The van?" I asked. "Cassie's?" He nodded. "And other things." He handed me the notice. Defaulted loan, Missed payments, 6 months behind. Because Dad had co-signed, the company was exercising the full right to assess assets. They're assets. They're just doing their job, he muttered, sitting down slowly. My stomach dropped as I read through the list. His pickup truck, his woodworking tools, even the antique hutch Mom had inherited from her grandmother. Wait, this is everything, I said. They're coming after all of it? Mom was still holding her fork. She told us it was going well, she whispered, that the bookings were full. They weren't, I said. She hasn't made a single payment. I didn't add the other part, not yet, that this wasn't just about financial irresponsibility. This was about deceit. Cassie had pretended everything was perfect, and none of us had questioned it because we were used to her performance. We were so used to her stage that we forgot to look behind the curtain. The men returned later that afternoon. Dad opened the garage without a word. They walked in with clipboards, nodded respectfully, and began assessing. They pointed to the truck, to Dad's workbench, even to a set of carving knives he hadn't used in years but kept sharpened anyway. One of them ran his hand along the edge of the hutch in the dining room. Mom stood in the hallway, hands clutched around a dish towel that was already damp from earlier. I don't think she blinked the entire time. They said we can submit a list of items we'd like to keep, Dad told me later, but there's no guarantee. That night, I drove home in silence. I didn't listen to music, didn't call anyone, just stared at the road, lit by the soft orange glow of street lamps and the ache of everything I hadn't said. When I got home, I kicked off my shoes and sank onto the couch. My laptop buzzed with a Slack notification from work. I ignored it. Then I opened Zoom and called Maya. She answered from her living room in Denver, wrapped in a hoodie, hair pulled up messily. Behind her, a TV flickered with a muted crime show. She squinted at the screen. Whoa, this is unexpected. Did something happen? I didn't even greet her. Just said, Cassie defaulted on her loan. Dad co-signed. They're coming for the truck and Mom's antique hutch. She blinked. Wait, what? I told her everything, start to finish. The pitch, the loan, the months of pretending, the men in polos with clipboards and expressionless nods. When I finished, she didn't say anything for a while. Then, leaning in toward the webcam, she said, she didn't fail at business. She succeeded at manipulating your father. I stared at her. She didn't build a salon, Maya continued. She built a fantasy, and he funded it because it made him feel like a good dad. I leaned back. Rachel, she said, her voice softer, you've been the one holding the pieces together for years. Maybe it's time someone else sees what happens when you stop. I logged off not long after. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just walked to the corner of my living room where a houseplant I'd been meaning to throw out was still barely clinging to life. One leaf curled, the others brittle. I poured it a glass of water and went to bed. Cassie posted a story the next morning. Rooftop brunch. A flute of mimosa held high in a perfectly manicured hand. Caption, Sundays are for self-care. Some people cry when they're sorry. Cassie cried because she got caught. It was a cloudy Tuesday, one of those Texas autumn days that couldn't decide if it wanted to be summer or winter. The air was thick and humid, clinging to my skin like something unfinished. I hadn't told her I was coming. I just got in the car, turned the key, and drove. Cassie lived on the second floor of a freshly painted condo complex on the edge of the city. Modern units, glass balconies, identical succulents on each stoop. Her SUV was in the lot, trunk open, half filled with labeled boxes. Skincare, nail kits, Cassie's closet. It looked less like a move and more like an escape plan in progress. I climbed the steps 2 at a time. She answered after the second knock, barefoot in black leggings and a cropped hoodie that said, "Good vibes only." Her face shifted when she saw me. Surprise, then a flicker of guilt, then a smile too polished to be real. Rach, didn't expect you. I know. She stepped aside without asking why I was there. Her condo smelled like coconut and lemon polish, the kind of artificial freshness that tried too hard. I took it in. Counters cluttered with half-packed supplies, open laptop still displaying her Instagram dashboard, and, on the coffee table, a stack of receipts. I didn't ask. I picked them up. Cassie, what is this? I held one out. A resort in Tulum? A $1,200 handbag? Flights to Scottsdale? You told Dad this was for the business. She blinked, then turned away. I was going to pay it back. No, you weren't, I said calmly. You haven't made a single payment on that loan. I meant to. You meant to go shopping. You meant to take a luxury vacation. You meant to keep up appearances. And now that everything's falling apart, what? You cry and hope it resets? Her voice trembled, but not with remorse. You don't get it. I was trying to recharge. Everyone says you have to invest in yourself. This wasn't investment. This was indulgence. She started crying then, soft sobs into her sleeve, the same practiced rhythm I'd heard 100 times before. When she failed a test in high school, she'd cried her way into a retake. When she forgot to show up for our mom's birthday, she cried and blamed traffic. Every mistake had a tear-shaped loophole. You always think you're better than me, she said, voice cracking. Just because you follow the rules and fix everyone else's messes. No, I said quietly. I don't think I'm better. I just think I'm done. She looked up. I gestured to the receipts. This isn't about one bad decision. It's a pattern. You used Dad's name, his credit, his security, and now his retirement is at risk. I didn't mean for it to go this far, but it did. And now you want me to step in. There it was, the ask behind the tears. She bit her lip. Could you help? Just a little? For Dad? Maybe cover a few payments so they don't take the truck. I raised a hand. Stop. She froze. You didn't ask for help, I said, each word steady. You asked for cleanup. I'm not your cleaner. The silence after that was sharp. She stepped back like I'd slapped her. You're being heartless. No, I said. I'm being honest. She grabbed a tissue from the counter, wiped her eyes, and snapped. Well, I hope you sleep well while they come for his truck. I turned toward the door. As I reached for the handle, she said, You always wanted to see me fail. I paused, just long enough to answer. I never wanted you to fail. I just wanted you to take responsibility. Then I walked out. Neighbors on the lower floor had their blinds half drawn. A woman with a small dog stepped back inside as I passed. The whole complex felt like a stage set after the final curtain. Lights still on, but the story over. That night, I stayed late at work. There was a security vulnerability flagged by one of our beta testers, something buried deep in the back end that had gone unnoticed. I traced it through 6 layers of code, rewrote the protocol, tested the patch, and deployed it before midnight. No one would ever know how close the system had come to a breach. No one thanked me. No one even noticed. But that wasn't why I did it. I did it because it was the right thing to do. Quietly, without applause. When I finally closed my laptop, I opened my phone, scrolled through my contacts, and stopped on Cassie's name. There was a photo from years ago, us at a pumpkin patch, her throwing leaves in the air, me half laughing, half holding a thermos of cider. I stared at it for a while. Then I tapped Delete Contact. The system asked if I was sure. I was. Some families build fences to keep others out. I built one to protect myself from the people inside. It had been a few weeks since I confronted Cassie, since the receipts, the tears, the twisted guilt. since I deleted her contact and told myself I was done. Fall had settled into Austin, not in the dramatic, leaf-swept ways they write about in novels, but in quiet hints. The mornings were cooler. The breeze carried a faint smell of chimney smoke. The leaves on the tree outside my apartment had gone from green to gold in a single weekend, then began to fall, soft, one by one. I hadn't visited my parents since the repo notice, but Mom called and asked if I could help with some documents. Her voice had that tight politeness she used when she didn't want to cry on the phone. When I arrived, Dad was in the living room, staring at the TV, which was turned off. The remote sat untouched beside him. He didn't look up when I walked in. Mom was in the kitchen, furiously wiping down already clean counters. "The negotiator said we need to itemize everything," she said, handing me a manila envelope. "They'll let us keep the truck. Maybe. But the garage." She paused. "The tools are probably going." I nodded and sat at the table. The same table where he'd signed the loan papers months ago. I flipped through the documents, payment histories, legal letters, a spreadsheet with red numbers that made my stomach knot. I highlighted, annotated, made notes, and called the debt firm on Dad's behalf. When they answered, he finally joined me, silent on the line, occasionally nodding though no one could see. He didn't say much. When the call ended, he stood and walked outside. I watched him through the window as he walked toward the garage, hand brushing against the railing. But when he reached the door, he stopped. He stared at it for a few seconds, then turned back. The garage stayed closed. That evening, I joined him for coffee on the back porch. He stirred sugar into his mug even though he drank it black. "Remember that storm when the fence blew down?" he asked, out of nowhere. I nodded. "You taught me to patch it." "Strong wood," he said, "but it doesn't matter if the foundation's off. Won't hold." We didn't say anything after that. The next day, Mom quietly sold the antique hutch, the one the repo agents had almost taken. A young couple from Round Rock picked it up in a U-Haul, chatting excitedly about how it would fit in their mid-century modern dining room. Mom smiled politely, but when they left, she stood in the empty space, hand on the wall, unmoving. I didn't ask if she was okay. Instead, I drove back to my apartment and texted Luis from work. He replied, "Sure, Cafe Medici. Noon?" We sat at a corner table, him sipping something with oat milk, me nursing an Americano. "How's the family stuff?" he asked gently. I shrugged. "Surviving." "You've been quiet at work." "Trying not to let it bleed through." He nodded. Then he looked at me, not in the usual tech bro way, but with the kind of attentiveness that makes you feel both seen and safe. "You patch systems," he said. "Code, networks, people." I gave a soft laugh. "Guilty. But who patches you?" I didn't have an answer. After coffee, I returned home and opened the closet where I stored old boxes from childhood, ones I hadn't opened in years. Inside were faded photos, a Girl Scout sash I barely remembered earning, and a laser pointer. I paused. It was wrapped in tissue paper, the tape yellowed with time. I unwrapped it carefully. I had built it in 9th grade for a science fair project, back when I wanted to be a physicist. Before I learned that being the quiet one in the family meant always playing second to the showstopper. I remember soldering the wires myself, gluing the casing, even painting it with a small R on the side. I hadn't thought about it in years. A sticky note rested on the bottom of the box. Mom's handwriting, "Donation pile?" She hadn't meant to hurt me, but it did. I sat on the floor with the laser pointer in my hand and let the silence stretch. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just felt something settle, like a floorboard long warped finally snapping into place. I placed it gently in my bag. That night, I stood over the one plant I'd nearly thrown out weeks ago. Its leaves were still limp, but not completely dead. One had a tinge of green at the edge. I repotted it in fresh soil, watered it, and placed it near the window. I didn't expect it to thrive. I didn't even expect it to survive. But I tried. And for the first time in a long time, that felt like enough. They threw a party for the family. I wasn't invited, but somehow I was still the main event. I first heard about the gathering through Mom's group text. It was an invitation, technically, but only in the most obligatory sense. No mention of my name, just holiday party at the Skylark rooftop, dress festive, family welcome. I didn't reply. A week later, I learned Cassie had coordinated the entire thing. Apparently, it was a thank you celebration for family support during her challenging business year. She framed it as resilience, rebranding failure into wisdom. A phoenix moment. Her specialty. I had no intention of going. I hadn't spoken to Cassie since our confrontation. I wasn't interested in polite smiles or tiny hors d'oeuvres served on doilies by people paid to pretend they cared. But what I didn't know then was that this party, this spectacle, would change everything. While string lights blinked above a crowd of relatives and longtime family friends, I was sitting at home, hunched over my laptop, debugging a warehouse inventory system that had inexplicably duplicated half of a client's stock. It was tedious work, but I liked it. Logical. Honest. No theatrics. Meanwhile, downtown, Cassie stood under gold-accented signage that read, "Stronger Together." She wore a winter white jumpsuit cinched with a gold belt, lips red, hair curled into waves that danced in the wind. Photographers, friends she'd paid in cocktails, snapped photos of her in front of a balloon arch shaped like a dollar sign. There were canapes with edible glitter, mini cheesecakes with number family strong stamped in chocolate on the top, a Spotify playlist of empowered women anthems blasted from sleek rooftop speakers, and right before dessert, she took the mic. "Hi everyone," she began, voice breathy and poised. "This year has taught me a lot, about courage, about failure, and mostly about the importance of showing up for each other." I wasn't there, but Uncle Ron filmed it all. His phone was propped discreetly on a folded napkin. He rarely said much at gatherings, but he saw everything. "I've learned that success isn't about never falling," Cassie continued. "It's about how many people help you up." She pressed a tissue to her cheek, just enough to shimmer in the fairy lights. "And I'm so lucky to be surrounded by those people tonight." The room applauded. Some stood. Then she smiled toward the back of the crowd. "And now, I'd love to invite my dad to say a few words." Frank stood slowly. His shoulders had curved more than they used to. His once brisk walk had turned into a thoughtful shuffle. He wore a navy suit that looked a size too big, as though he'd shrunk faster than anyone had noticed. He approached the mic with a folded piece of paper in his hand. It wasn't dramatic. He didn't clear his throat or raise his voice. He just looked out over the room and began. "I wasn't sure I was going to speak tonight," he said. "But something's been sitting on my heart for a while, and I think it's time to say it." Cassie smiled, clasped her hands. Everyone assumed he'd echo her speech, applaud her bounce back, maybe even announce some kind of family contribution or legacy gift. But he looked down at the paper, then back up. "I have 2 daughters," he said. "One who has always known how to shine, and one who has always made sure the light bulbs kept working." A ripple moved through the room. "She doesn't post pictures. She doesn't ask for applause. But when the bills pile up or the printer jams or someone needs to pick up prescriptions at midnight, she's already done it. Quietly." Cassie's smile faltered. Frank continued. "Her name is Rachel, And though she's not here tonight, she's the reason our family stayed standing when things got shaky. Silence. Then murmurs. I've made mistakes, he said, voice softer. And I let my pride blind me to who was really holding this house together. He unfolded the second page. So I want to make something clear. I've written a new will. The house, Rachel's, my tools, Rachel's, my pension savings, what's left. Rachel's, not because she asked, but because she earned it without asking. A stunned pause. Cassie built a brand, he said. Rachel built a life. One deserves applause. The other deserves my name. Then he stepped back. The room was still. Then came a slow clap. Uncle Ron, from his corner seat. Then others joined, hesitant at first, then louder. Not for Cassie, for me. And I wasn't even there. When the video reached me, it came with no caption. Just a silent airdrop from Uncle Ron the next morning. I watched it once, then again, then sat still for a long time. At the end of the clip, Cassie steps away from the dessert table, face blank. Her red lipstick still perfect, but her eyes unsure. The applause continues as she exits the frame. That evening, I pulled out the old watch Dad used to wear when he worked at the firehouse. He must have put it in the box Mom had left me last month, along with a few knickknacks and a folded note I hadn't read yet. I opened it. Rachel, you didn't need a stage to be strong. You just were, and I'm sorry it took me so long to say it. Dad, I didn't cry, but I did something I hadn't done in years. I stood in front of the mirror and smiled, not for the camera, not for anyone else. Just for me. Some things can't be fixed, but they can be planted again. Saturday mornings had become my sanctuary. No alarms, no Slack pings. Just the soft hum of the fridge, sunlight painting the wooden floor in slow-moving rectangles, and the smell of vanilla beans steeping in my coffee pot. It was a quiet rhythm I hadn't realized I'd created, one brewed over seasons of boundary building, forgiveness, and carefully chosen distance. That morning, a small package waited at my door. No fanfare. Just a plain brown box with my name written in my father's unmistakable print. Blocky, neat, and pressed too hard into the label like he was trying to make sure the ink reached the bone. Inside was his firehouse watch, the one with the worn leather strap and the scratched face. It still smelled faintly of ash and oil. Beneath it, folded with deliberate care, was a letter. I sat down at the kitchen table and unfolded it. Rachel, I used to think being a father meant fixing things. Broken toys, flat tires, misunderstandings. But you fixed things I never even saw were broken. You held us together. You didn't ask for attention or thanks. And I didn't offer either. I only saw it too late. This watch kept me on time for 30 years. Now I hope it reminds you that you've always been on time. Just never in the spotlight. Thank you. I'm proud of you. Dad. I read it once. Then again. And then I sat for a while, not crying, not speaking. Just allowing it to exist, to settle in the space between regret and release. Behind me, the plant I had nearly thrown out weeks ago now stood a little taller. One white bloom had opened during the night, stubborn and small, its petals curled just slightly at the edges. The same kind Mom used to grow in the backyard when we were little. She called them moonflowers, said they only opened when no one was looking. I placed the watch next to it on the windowsill. Later, I opened my laptop and sent a short email to Maya. Subject, he said it. Body. Not out loud, but he said it. I didn't elaborate. She'd understand. Then, almost on instinct, I pulled up Slack and messaged Luis. Thanks for reviewing that fix last week. Appreciate you watching my blind spots. He reacted with a thumbs up emoji, followed by one word: always. I closed my laptop. Outside, kids were riding scooters up and down the sidewalk. A dog barked 2 doors down. Somewhere, a neighbor was burning a cinnamon candle too strong for October. I let the ordinary moments fill the space around me, tiny reminders that life moved forward, whether you clung to the past or not. Cassie had not apologized. She likely never would, and I'd stopped waiting. I hadn't forgiven her, not really, but I had forgiven myself for staying too long in a story where I was never written in. In that forgiveness, I found something even better than closure. I found peace. And as the wind shifted the curtain just enough to let in more light, I sipped my coffee and let it warm everything I had once thought too cold to feel again. There's a quiet kind of peace that comes when you stop waiting to be seen and start seeing yourself. That morning, as the sunlight caught the bloom I'd almost given up on, I realized healing doesn't always come in grand gestures. Sometimes it arrives in the softest moments, unasked for, but finally yours. In families, love can get tangled in expectations. But the people who care for us quietly, without needing praise, deserve to be heard too. We don't need to fix everything to be worthy of a seat at the table. We just need to stand in our truth. If this story reminded you of someone you love, or someone you used to be, I'd be honored to hear what it brought up for you. You're always welcome to share, reflect, or just sit with it a while.